Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves at a long, creaky wooden table somewhere in a smoky medieval kitchen. The fire's low, the air smells faintly of onions, ale, and regret. And someone has just served you a bowl of something steaming that may or may not have once been a hedgehog. You're hungry. Probably, but also slightly afraid. Because tonight, we're diving fork first into the bizarre world of medieval food. The strange, the unsettling, sometimes surprisingly tasty dishes that people actually chose to eat. From turnip wine to meat jelly with feathers, this was a cuisine born not from abundance, but from desperation, confusion, and a deep distrust of refrigeration. And you might not survive this one. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you are truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background. And together, let's ease into tonight's story. You think you know medieval food? Thick stews? Roasted meat on spits? Goblets of wine? And the occasional loaf of bread baked fresh and golden? That's the image, drawn mostly from movie feasts and Renaissance fair turkey legs. But the real medieval diet? Oh, it's a mystery stew of boiled bones, cabbage that's been arguing with itself for days, and something green that shouldn't be green and definitely wasn't meant to fizz. If you were poor, food was a repetitive symphony of barley, more barley, and something pretending to be a vegetable. If you were rich, congratulations, you had swan with its beak still on. Or maybe eel pie, stuffed with spices to hide the fact it had been dead long enough to hold opinions. Tonight's story will lead you through 4 distinct paths. First, it's a tragic culinary fate of the peasant cook, who had to conjure meals out of bad salt, moldy barley, and an onion so old it had started whispering secrets. Second, the royal kitchen, where the chef of King Richard II crafted dishes like almond milk swan, peacock feathers intact, and green sauce that tasted like war crimes against basil. Third, we'll peek into a curious parchment cookbook found in a shoe, yes, literal shoe, filled with baffling recipes lost to time and better judgment. And finally, we'll end with the grand spectacle of the medieval banquet. A performance in meat, fire, and pastry sculptures that may or may not stare back at you while you eat. This isn't a tale of gastronomy, it's a tale of survival. A tale of what people will eat when the pantry is mostly cobwebs. The spices are locked in the monastery, and the only thing you caught today was a headache. Let's begin with the peasant cook, the moldy pot, and the dream of something edible. You are the cook. Or rather, you are the person in the household who knows how not to poison everyone immediately. It counts as cooking in the eyes of the village. Congratulations, someone just handed you a bag of barley, a single limp leek, and a lump of something that was cheese 3 weeks ago, and is now a philosophical question. Your kitchen is the floor. It's maybe a stone slab if your family is doing well. The hearth sputters weakly, trying to remember the last time it had proper firewood. The smoke from yesterday's fire never fully left. It clings to the air like guilt, drifting in lazy spirals around the hanging pots and the ceiling beams darkened from decades of bad ideas cooked slowly. You reach for the salt. It's damp. Again, it always is. Your salt supply comes in 3 varieties: wet, damp, and suspiciously crunchy. You scrape some from the corner of a clay jar. It smells like it's seen things. You use it anyway. The barley goes into a pot. You've already soaked it overnight, because raw barley is harder than confession and twice as unforgiving. But even soaked, it takes hours to cook, and you have maybe half an hour before someone comes sniffing around asking, "Is that dinner?" It isn't. Not yet. It's still just wet rocks pretending to be food. You add water. Not clean water. There's no such thing, just water. The kind that tastes like it passed through a goat at some point in its career. You boil it anyway. Boiling kills things. Probably now, time to season. You look around. You have options: dried nettle, dried sage, or ash from last night's fire. You use all 3. You stir and tell yourself it's rustic. A neighbor once told you to throw in a pigeon egg to thicken the broth. But pigeon eggs are rare. Pigeons are elusive. And you haven't caught one since the time you fell off the roof with a basket in a dream. So you settle for crushed barley husk. It doesn't thicken much, but it makes the texture feel like regret with a spoon. Someone asks what you're making. You answer confidently. Barley stew. It sounds noble, like something a monk would eat in silence. What you're actually making is hot barley water with panic, expectation, warm, filling peasant porridge. Reality, a bubbling pot of swamp gruel that smells vaguely like wet socks and ambition. The only vegetable today is an onion. It's not your onion. It's the household's one onion. For the month, it's already started growing tiny shoots, which wave at you like green fingers of defiance. Cut it anyway, apologizing with every slice. You don't even use the whole thing, just 1/4. You'll need the rest later, probably forever. The stew simmers. Someone sneezes. You pretend it didn't go into the pot. Dinner is served. You ladle out the gruel into wooden bowls, each with the same dull beige consistency. The only garnish is a single chive you found under the windowsill, possibly planted by accident, possibly just moss. You take your portion last. You chew. It tastes like warmth's third cousin once removed who only visits when there's bad weather. Someone compliments it. You nod. Then they say it's better than last week. You nod again, pretending you didn't serve the exact same thing last week, and the week before, and the week before that. You'll serve it again tomorrow, and they'll eat it again tomorrow, because there's no meat, there's no butter, there's no joy. There's just barley. There's just barley. There's just barley. You wake up knowing what today's meal will be. It will be soup. It was soup yesterday. It will be soup tomorrow. You do not remember a time when it wasn't soup. Sometimes it dreams of being stew. Sometimes you lie to yourself and call it pottage, but at its core, it is soup. Again, you shuffle to the hearth. The fire from last night has died. Of course it has. You forgot to bank it again, because you fell asleep listening to your cousin explain why geese are spies. Now you're cold, cranky, and one fire spark away from a full nervous breakdown. You scrape at the ash with a stick. Single ember glows defiantly, like a tired candle with commitment issues. You coax it back to life with more hope than fuel. It finally catches. You feel powerful. Then the smoke hits you in the face, and you spend the next minute coughing like an overdramatic ghost. Today's ingredients arrive in a wooden bowl. Side half a leek wilted. A handful of dried beans, probably smug. A turnip, which looks like it's been making decisions behind your back. A single slice of onion dried at the edge and curled like a sad scroll. You stare at it all and think, this is dinner. This is what stands between your family and the gnawing silence of empty bowls. The leek goes in first. You chop it like it insulted your mother. It's soft already, which helps. Then the beans. These will take hours, but time is the only thing you have in excess. The turnip takes some effort. Its skin is thick, its interior mealy, resists the knife like it doesn't want to be involved. You sigh, you add water. Slightly less green than yesterday's water, a win. You add the onion last. Sliver. Just a sliver. You let it float on top like a ship lost at sea. It releases its smell. Sharp, sweet, promising. And everyone in the hut leans a little closer to the pot, as though proximity might enhance the flavor. It won't. You stir the pot clockwise. This doesn't help, but someone once said it made the flavors friendlier. Got the. Because believing costs nothing, and skepticism doesn't season turnips. Someone suggests adding meat. You laugh for 6 full seconds. Then you both stare into the pot in silence. The truth is, the idea of meat has become mythical. You remember it vaguely. Chewy, salty, something that left grease on your lips and happiness in your soul. Now meat is something you hear about when travelers pass through, like dragons or fair taxation. A neighbor once claimed to have caught a squirrel, cooked it with leeks. You nodded respectfully, even though you were pretty sure it was a rat. The bones told a different story. Dinner is served. The soup is watery. The beans are not fully soft. The turnip tastes like soap. And the onion has vanished into the liquid, like it never existed. You sip anyway. You sip again. You pretend the aftertaste is complex. Someone asks what's in it. You say everything we had. It sounds noble. You chew a bean. It crunches like it resents you. But you eat it, and so does everyone else. The pot will be refilled tomorrow. With water, with desperation. And with a slice of onion if you're lucky. You want to season the soup. That's your first mistake. Seasoning, in your mind, should mean a pinch of something green and fragrant. A whisper of thyme, a note of rosemary. Maybe even a courageous flake of salt. In medieval reality, Seasoning means you walk outside. Oh, pick whatever hasn't been eaten by goats or frost and hope it doesn't kill you. You rummage through the bundle of herbs hanging above the door. Once, they looked fresh. Now they look like the ghosts of plants that died politely and didn't want to cause a fuss. You find a few strands of marjoram, or maybe it's dried grass. You're not a botanist. You crumble it between your fingers and let it fall into the pot like a tiny act of resignation. You reach for the salt again. It's still damp. We add some anyway. You add some anyway. Your hands smell like old wood and faint mildew. You ignore that part. In the corner, there's a little clay crock. You open it. Side is a miracle. Something that might once have been lard, but now appears to have developed its own opinions. A pale film has settled on top, like a sad pudding skin. You scrape a bit off and drop it into the stew, telling yourself it will add richness. What it actually adds is color, gray mostly, and a smell that suggests betrayal. You stir it all together. The broth turns from vague brown to uncertain beige. Someone passing by asks what you're making. You say herb stew. They nod, impressed. You do not elaborate. Now, it's time for bread. You reach for the loaf. It's from last week, or maybe the week before. It's hard enough to qualify as a weapon in some regions. You knock it against the table. It echoes. That seems ominous. You break it in half with effort. There's mold, of course there is. It's green. It's fuzzy. It's quietly colonizing. You brush it off like it's just dust. You dip the bread into the pot. It softens. Slightly, the stew doesn't improve, but now you're eating it faster, before the sogginess wears off. Someone asks if there's cheese. You check the shelf. There is something. Round. Pale. Smells like abandonment and old boots. That's probably cheese. You shave off a sliver and drop it into your own bowl. It doesn't melt. It just sits there, glaring. You chew. The bread is chewy in the way that tree bark might be chewy. The broth tastes like ambition filtered through swamp water. The cheese squeaks faintly against your teeth like it wants to escape. But it's warm. It's vaguely edible. It doesn't bite back. That's what passes for a win. Later, someone compliments your use of herbs. You nod and try not to make eye contact with the dried thistle you tossed in by accident. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Maybe with fewer herbs, maybe with more. Maybe with something new that you thought was a mushroom and turned out to be a pinnacone. It doesn't matter. The flavors will always blend into the same result. Confusing, warm, and just this side of dangerous. Seasoning isn't about taste. It's about hope. It's a hint of green, even if it's mold. You once heard a rumor that stew could contain meat. Real meat. The kind that came from animals with legs and a name. You didn't believe it at first. That kind of luxury sounds made up, like flying carpets or landlords who lower the rent. But then, one market day you saw it. A haunch of something. Possibly deer, possibly dog, possibly optimism in disguise. Roasting on a spit. The smell was unreal. Rich, greasy, filled with the promise of flavor and poor decisions. You floated toward it like a cartoon character in a dream. Then you saw the price and floated right back. So you return home meatless again. Your household didn't expect you to bring meat, but they secretly hoped. You could see it in their faces when you walked in holding only turnips. Expectation. You walk in triumphant, a roast swinging in one hand. Reality. You have a burlap sack with one sad carrot and a cabbage that looks like it is giving up. No matter you're the cook, you will invent, you will pretend. You will create illusions of meat with plants, salt, and pure performance. You start with the pot. Always the pot. You throw in some dried mushrooms. Not because they taste like meat, but because they rebrown and chewy, and you can lie to yourself if you chew fast enough. Then some garlic. Not fresh, of course. Just cloves dried so thoroughly they've become little wooden knots of defiance. You crush them with a stone. Now for umami. Not that you know the word. But you crave it like a starving poet craves metaphors. You throw in the mushroom water. You add the liquid from last week's pickled cabbage. Salty, acidic, suspicious. You stir and nod. It smells complicated. You chop the cabbage into the stew. It wilts immediately, like it doesn't want to be here. Then you reach for your secret weapon, a hard lump of something called meat stone. No one knows what's in it. Probably beef, possibly shoe. But you've been soaking it in ale for 3 days, and it now has the color and texture of confidence. Let it simmer. Let it simmer. It doesn't dissolve, but it does leak something vaguely savory into the broth. You pretend that's flavor? The stew turns a richer brown. The household leans in. Someone whispers, "Is that meat?" You don't answer. You just stir dramatically and throw in a bay leaf. Dinner is ready. The broth is thickish. The chunks are soft. The illusion is complete. They eat. They make satisfied noises. Someone says it tastes hearty. Someone else asks if it's mutton. Like something like that. You chew slowly. It tastes of mushrooms, salt, and the lie you're telling with your entire soul. But that's medieval cooking. It's not about ingredients. It's about pretending. There is no meat. There was never meat. There will probably never be meat. But if you close your eyes, chew fast, and add enough salt, you can almost believe it. You wake up excited. It's a feast day. Finally, the calendar says, Saint somebody. It's day. One of those saints whose miracles are vague, but conveniently timed to distract you from your collapsing morale. Feast days mean more food, right? A proper meal? Maybe even something with fat in it. No, you fool. Because while it's called a feast day, what it actually means, for you, is waking up earlier, cooking longer, and feeding more people with the exact same amount of ingredients you already didn't have. It means stretching 1 egg into 10 servings. It means pretending barley pudding is festive. You look at your pot, you sigh, it sighs back, or maybe that's just the wind. There's a visitor. He's a cousin, or possibly a monk, or possibly just someone who heard there might be food. He's brought wine. It's made from something that was probably once a fruit. Tastes like betrayal, vinegar, and sour secrets. You serve it anyway, drinks it happily. You prepare the feast. Barley stew with extra water. Cabbage, cut into decorative shapes, which mostly look like cabbages. Bread that was hidden under a damp cloth for 2 days to soften, and now smells like ambition gone wrong. And the DA turnip boiled, mashed, and salted aggressively until it forgets it's a vegetable. There is also Lent to consider. Lent ruins everything. Cannot serve meat. You cannot serve cheese. You cannot even serve hope. Expectation. Joyous festival with singing, meat, and laughter. Reality. Tepid root mash served on leaves because all the wooden bowls were borrowed and not returned. You decorate the table, a single candle, bent. It refuses to stand up straight. It's a metaphor for your life. The guests arrive, they smile. Compliment your barley stew. Again, you've renamed it Saint's Broth to make it sound seasonal. Someone says, "Is that cinnamon?" It's dirt. You nod anyway. Someone brought a pie. You get excited. Then you realize it's a Lent pie, filled with fish and sorrow. The fish is dried herring. It smells like old rope. You chew politely and try not to cry. But still, there is joy. Someone tells a story about how their grandfather once caught a goose. Not for food, just to feel something. There's laughter. It echoes strangely off the low ceiling. The candle flickers. The turnip mash is miraculously warm. And for a moment you forget it's Lent. You forget you've had barley for 19 days straight. You forget that your only seasoning is lies. After the feast, you scrape the bowls clean. You set aside the better crusts of bread for tomorrow. You save the last spoon of mash for the neighbor who couldn't come. You lick the wooden spoon, and it tastes like salt, smoke, and someone else's story. This was a feast, technically, and tonight you will dream of fat geese and thick gravy. You'll wake up to turnips. Again. Because in the medieval kitchen, celebration is just regular hunger wearing its nice tunic. Someone mentioned eggs this morning, just casually in passing, but that was enough. The idea of an egg. Real, whole, smooth. With its smug little oval of protein and possibility, plants itself in your mind and refuses to leave. You start planning? A fried egg? Impossible. There's no pan that doesn't stick like betrayal. A boiled egg? Doable, maybe? If you find one? If you find two? That's a miracle. That's Sunday. You start asking around? Any eggs today? You whisper like you're trading secrets. One neighbor says their hen's broody. Another says their rooster is possessed. No one has an egg. Someone offers you a feather. You'd say thank you and consider eating it. By mid-morning, you're staring at the chicken coop behind your cousin's house. It has chickens, technically. It's mostly bones with feathers. They glare at you like they know what you want. You mutter to them. You try reasoning. You promise better scraps. One of them sneezes. Another falls asleep mid-peck. No eggs. Expectation. A golden yolk trembling gently in a warm broth. Reality, you eat a single boiled bean and pretend it's symbolic. Back home, you search the larder again. Nothing. The shelf smells like old cabbage and indecision. You check the straw basket one more time. Still no egg. Just a pebble that looks like it might have dreams. You remember the one time you had an egg? It was spring. The sun was out. The bread wasn't yet mold. You cracked it into a pot with barley and everyone ate slowly, reverently, as if it were sacred. Someone even said grace out loud. You almost cried. Today you mash turnip into a flat cake, fry it on the edge of the hearthstone, and call it mock egg. It does not resemble an egg. It does not taste like an egg. It smells faintly of burnt apology. But you chew anyway. You chew and close your eyes and imagine yolk. Someone knocks. A visitor. They're carrying a small, wrapped cloth. They say nothing. Oh, just nod and hand it to you. Inside, one egg. Real. Warm. Freshly laid. You nearly drop it in shock. You stare at it. This is power. This is wealth. This is the universe remembering you exist. And now, you face a choice. You could eat it now. Boil it. Slice it into 4. Share it with the family. Create a memory so tender, it will carry you through winter. Or you could save it. Wait for a feast. Wait for hope. Wait for the moment when its impact will be strongest. You set it aside, reverently. On a cloth, on the shelf. Away from the cat. You will not eat the egg today. You will dream about it instead. Because sometimes in the medieval kitchen, the idea of food is stronger than the food itself. You decide it's a dairy day. That's ambitious, reckless even. But your stomach whispers promises to your brain, and your brain, weakened by months of boiled beige, starts to believe. You imagine it clearly. A slab of bread with a smear of butter, a wedge of cheese that doesn't creak when you chew. Something soft, salty, and civilized. Your mouth waters. Your hopes rise like poorly leavened dough. So you go to the cupboard, you find the cheese. It's wrapped in cloth. That's a good sign. You unwrap it slowly, reverently, like revealing a treasure or a mistake. It's a mistake. The cheese has changed. It was hard before, now it's harder. Not like a wheel of cheese, but like a wheel of consequence. You chip off a corner with a knife that promptly bends. You sniff it. It smells like ambition in footnotes. You take a bite. Squeaks loudly. It squeaks like a mouse being stepped on. The texture is somewhere between stale bread and structural timber. You chew, you regret, you swallow. Someone asks if the cheese is good. You say, it's aged. That's not a lie. It's just a refusal to acknowledge that it's aged into a new species. Then there's butter. Or the dream of butter. You remember butter? Soft, yellow, creamy. A luxury that once melted on your tongue and didn't argue on the way down. There's none today. You have something else, though. A jar of drippings, technically fat, practically regret. You skim a hardened layer off the top, spread it on bread, and call it field butter. It tastes like roast failure and cold panic. Expectation, a rustic dairy meal. Reality, fermented chalk on stale toast. You keep going. You find a lump of something labeled curds. It's either cheese in progress or cheese in distress. You poke it, pokes back. You decide to let it age more, possibly forever. You once heard a tale of soft cheese, creamy, spreadable, aromatic. You've never seen it. You suspect it's made up by poets. Your cheese is not soft. Your cheese does not spread. Your cheese arrives with commitment and leaves only silence. The fire hisses in the corner. Your stomach makes a noise like distant thunder. Take another bite. The cheese squeaks again. Someone looks up. You pretend it was the floor. Later, you try to melt the cheese. You place it near the hearth on a flat rock. After 10 minutes, it's hotter, not softer, just warmer and angrier. You eat it anyway. Eat it while imagining better things. Brie camembert, a cow that loves you. There is no butter. There is no brie. There's only squeak. And you know you'll eat it again tomorrow. Because in this house, cheese doesn't melt. It resists. Bread is supposed to be comfort. You believe this, vaguely. It's in the Bible. It's in lullabies. It's in your memory. One loaf, one time, soft enough to fold without snapping. That was a good week. The flour was only mildly gritty, and the yeast hadn't died of despair. But today is not that week. Today's bread is from the same dough you've been reusing since Tuesday. It's mostly rye, partly barley, and entirely confused. The loaf is shaped like regret, rises reluctantly, like someone dragged out of bed to confess. You tap it. It thuds. You pick it up. It weighs slightly more than your emotional baggage. You set it on the board and wonder if slicing it requires permission from a priest. You try anyway. The knife makes it halfway through, then stops. Not because it's dull, but because the bread is contemplating self-defense. Expectation. Crusty outside, soft inside. Reality. Crusty everywhere, soft nowhere. Still, you persevere. You chew a piece, and it feels like chewing a memory of food. Dense, dry, slightly dusty. There are seeds in it. Possibly intentional. Possibly accidental. One cracks under your tooth with the enthusiasm of gravel. You toast it near the hearth, hoping heat will soften it. It doesn't. It just becomes warmer and more confident in its stubbornness. You remember the communal oven back when there was firewood and time? Everyone brought their loaves wrapped in cloth. You once forgot yours for 2 hours. It came out like a brick and was later used to repair the chicken coop. Today's loaf isn't much different. Someone says it smells good. You smile. You don't answer. You try soaking it in broth. Floats, then sinks, then floats again. Like it's not sure what it wants. You bite into the soggy part. And it tastes like wet bark. You add salt. And now it tastes like wet bark at sea. Still, you eat. Because it's bread. Because it's yours. Because the alternative is just broth. And even that's mostly imagination lately. Someone suggests scraping the crust into crumbs and frying them with herbs. You nod. You try. Crumbs catch fire. The herbs laugh in smoke. Later, you use the end piece to plug a hole in the wall. It fits. You feel proud. You feel sad. Bread is supposed to be a blessing. Today it's a building material. And yet, you'll bake again tomorrow. You'll knead the dough like you're trying to reason with it. You'll wait for it to rise, like you're waiting for a miracle. And when it doughs in tea, when it comes out dense and aggressive, you will eat it anyway. Because you are stubborn too. Because sometimes, survival is just eating the thing that tried to break your teeth yesterday. There's a root on the table. You're not sure what it is? It might be a turnip. It might be a parsnip. It might be the reason you wake up coughing at night. But it's here. It's edible, technically, and it's your dinner. You poke it. It pokes back, emotionally. The skin is thick and slightly wrinkled like it's been through things and doesn't want to talk about them. You begin to peel it. The peel resists. It clings like shame. Bits fly off and hit the floor with soft, accusing thuds. Inside, it's pale, vaguely yellow or gray. The color of indecision. Smell it. Earthy. A bit like old rain and bad thoughts. Expectation. A sweet, earthy flavor. Something that will roast well or mash into warmth. Reality. The texture of boiled sponge and the flavor profile of boiled nothing. Still, it's the centerpiece of tonight's meal. You boil it. You always boil it. Not because you want to, but because roasting takes firewood and ambition. You have neither. Into the pot it goes, alongside a scrap of leek and some dried herbs you 90% sure are in tea poisonous. The water bubbles like it's trying to escape. The root floats stubbornly. You poke it until it gives up. Half an hour later, it's soft, or at least not hard. You mash it. It fights back. You add a little salt. It hides the flavor behind a wall of blandness. You serve it with ceremony. A dollop of mash on each plate, shaped into a mound. You drizzle it with pan drippings, which is just the water from the pot pretending to be sauce. Someone says, "This tastes like turnip." You nod solemnly, not entirely sure if that's praise or a cry for help. You remember hearing about vegetables with color? Peas? Carrots, even? Dare you say it? Onions that weren't translucent ghosts of themselves. You've never seen such things in real life. They live in stories told by merchants who definitely exaggerate and definitely don't live on soup. You try roasting the leftover mash. It burns on the outside, stays cold in the middle, and smells like regret in loaf form. Later, a neighbor visits. They see the scraps on your table and ask, "Was it the white root or the yellow root?" You shrug. You don't know. You're not a botanist. You're barely a cook. You're just a person with a pot and too much trust. They pause. Some of the yellow ones cause. Dreams. You stare at the leftovers. You consider feeding them to your cousin, just to see. That night, everyone sleeps fitfully. Someone mutters about goats in armor. Someone else sits up and yells, "Who stole the bishop's onion?" You lie awake watching the fire dim and wonder what you actually ate, because that's how it goes. You prepare something. You serve it. You eat it, and only later do you question everything. It's morning. You're hungry again. Hunger is your most reliable companion. Like a dog that doses in tea bark but follows you absolutely everywhere, wagging its empty bowl and staring into your soul. You lift the lid from the pot. The smell rises slowly, like a ghost trying to remember how it died. This is yesterday's stew, or maybe the day before's. You can't be sure anymore. Time softens in the pot, like overboiled barley. What's in it? You see shapes? A lump that might be bread, a leaf that might be cabbage, a skin of something that might have been cheese, but now looks like a medieval tax document, damp, official, and vaguely threatening. You stir. The spoon resists. There's a layer on top, congealed, glossy, the color of weak tea in strong disappointment. It wobbles. You call it flavor, you lie. You reheat it anyway. You always do. Fire's expensive, but food is sacred. Even when it's a bowl of edible confusion, expectation, a hearty reheat, reality. Sadness stew with bonus clumps. You ladle it out. The texture is thicker than before, but not in a comforting way. More like wallpaper paste. If the wallpaper was made of turnip dreams and bread sorrow, you add water to thin it. It doesn't help. It just distributes the flavor evenly, which turns out to be a mistake. Now every bite tastes equally like no. Someone says, "It's better the next day." You nod slowly, spoon hovering midair, wondering if they've lost the ability to taste or just the will to complain. You add salt, it does nothing. You add vinegar, it argues back. You eat it plain. The bread you saved from last night is staler now. It bends less and fights more. You dunk it in the stew. It floats briefly, then gives up and sinks like a martyr. The cheese rind you forgot in your apron pocket has reappeared. You sniff it. You regret that. You drop it into the pot anyway. It dissolves. Sort of. Someone asks what's for dinner. You say, "Surprise." They nod. They know what that means. It's the same surprise as yesterday. The table is quiet. Everyone chews like it's a chore. Because it is. Because food is no longer joy. It's a system, a loop, a ritual of keeping yourself barely alive on things your ancestors would have called punishment. You finish your bowl. You wipe it clean with a crust. You stare at the bottom. There's a bean. Just one. You didn't taste it before. You don't know how it survived. You eat it slowly. It crunches defiantly. Possibly a rock. You smile anyway, because this is the life of the peasant cook. You make food from scraps. You serve it with conviction. You eat the lies you cooked. And tomorrow, when you lift the lid again, you'll pretend it's new. You'll pretend it's better. You'll pretend it's enough. You are no longer a peasant. Not in the culinary sense, at least. You've been pulled or possibly shoved into the hallowed, echoing kitchens of the royal court. Specifically, King Richard II's court. The boy king with a taste for pageantry, spectacle, and feasts that feel more like theater than meals. And now, somehow you are one of his cooks. Congratulations. Also, condolences. You thought cooking for royalty would be luxurious? Butter in buckets, spices in scoops, maybe even sugar that doesn't require a sermon to unlock. Instead, it's pressure, it's precision. It's 100 dishes for 100 guests, none of whom know your name, and all of whom are ready to throw poultry if it arrives lukewarm. You are not allowed to be warm, or tired, or human. You are a moving part of a gilded machine powered by ambition, grease, and several oxen. Morning, your orders are clear. Swan and almond milk. A dish both beautiful and deeply confusing. First, you find the swan. It's already been plucked. You are grateful for this, because plucking a swan is an act of warfare. Feathers hide in your hair for weeks. But even dead and defeathered, the swan looks judgmental. You prepare it anyway. Expectation. Meat that roasts gently, browns evenly, impresses nobility. Reality. Meat that dries fast, smells like river mud, and refuses to behave. You soak it in brine. You rub it with sage and salt. You roast it carefully. Then you douse it in almond milk, which sounds delicate, but is actually crushed almonds beaten into water until both are confused and offended. You drizzle the sauce with care. It doesn't drizzle, it plops. You plate it. You arrange sprigs of herbs like you're apologizing in foliage. Then you reattach the neck and beak, roasted separately and mounted upright, so that the swan stares at the diner while they eat its chest. This is apparently good manners. Someone from the upper hall walks in, checks the presentation and nods once. You're not praised, you're just not punished. That's the system, next to green sauce. Not herby green, no. This is vivid, emerald, unsettling. It involves sorrel, parsley, vinegar, ground bread, and the tears of 3 kitchen boys who got the ratios wrong last week. The king expects color. You blend furiously. Looks like a pond. It smells like springtime and regret. You serve it cold in a scallop shell. No one eats it. But it must be there. You prepare dishes by the dozen. Blankmanger, peacock jelly, custards molded into towers. You sweat through your linen, burn your fingers. You forget your own name. And then the feast begins. Music plays. Trays are lifted. Swans parade. The nobles cheer. You stand behind the wall, invisible. You do not eat. You do not rest. You wait for the next command. For the next impossible dish. For the next day when King Richard asks for something new, something decadent, something no peasant has ever seen, and no cook has ever quite figured out. Because your job is not to feed the hungry, it's to impress the full. You are decorating a bird. This isn't metaphor, it's not poetic. You are, quite literally, gluing feathers back onto a roasted peacock, so it looks alive again, despite being profoundly undeniably dead. It's called entremet. It's meant to delight, to impress, to convince the nobility that their meal can stare back at them in silent, roasted judgment. You hold the beak gently. You position it just so, smooth down the tail, long and iridescent, fanned like the world's most extravagant dinner napkin. You secure the legs so they look proud instead of collapsed. It's food, yes, but also performance. Sculpture, theater with gravy, expectation. Roast bird for sustenance. Reality, roast bird dressed for a funeral in reverse. The feathers are not washed. You do not wash feathers. Washing is for people with time, and you have none. You've got 3 more of these birds to reassemble before the 3rd course. The glue is made from honey and regret. The air smells like roasted meat, sweat, and the faint tang of vinegar used as perfume. A boy enters with a tray of dyed pastries. Blue, green, orange, colors never meant for flour. You nod without looking. He sets them beside the fish pies, shaped like castles, and the apple tarts molded into saints. One of the saints is melting slightly. You pretend not to notice. The master of ceremonies arrives. He checks the peacocks. He sniffs. He approves. You feel no joy. Only relief. You've spent hours on a dish no one will eat. Or if they do, they'll eat the meat and discard the decoration. The part you made, the part that matters. You used to cook for hunger, for warmth, for tired children and cold evenings. Now you cook for reaction, for laughter, for gasps, for the sound of someone saying, "Is that a peacock? Yes? Yes, it is." You made sure of it. You once asked if you could simplify the presentation, just serve the meat plainly. Someone laughed, not kindly. You stopped asking. Now you build swans that float in almond milk lakes, boars with golden apples in their mouths, pies that play music when opened, a mechanical bird hidden inside, wound up with a crank made by the blacksmith. You make things no one needs for people who already have everything. And still, you try. Because if your sauce breaks, if the pastry cracks, if the feathers fall off, you know the punishment isn't just embarrassment, it's demotion. Shame. Yes. Going back to the kitchens where they peel onions until their eyes forget how to stop crying. You finish the final peacock, you step back. It glimmers under the torchlight. Absurd, majestic, tragic. Someone claps. Not for you, of course. For the bird. You nod anyway, because here in the king's kitchen, Your job isn't to make food. It's to make people forget they're eating. You're making a castle out of sugar. It sounds like madness, and it is. But in the kitchens of King Richard II, madness is on the menu as often as meat. The banquet calls for a centerpiece. Something to awe the dukes, terrify the visiting French, and remind everyone that the king can turn something as rare as sugar into something as pointless as architecture. So you begin. First, the sugar. It's not the soft white powder you're dreaming of, it's rock hard. It comes in loaves. Break it with a hammer. You chip it like flint. You melt it in a pot that's older than your spine feels. And slowly, carefully, stir until it's a bubbling syrup that threatens to leap out and scar your arms with ambition. Expectation, the joy of baking, reality, third-degree burns. With decorative flair, you pour it into molds. You've carved them from wood and desperation. Towers, battlements, tiny crenellations. You glue it together with more sugar, cooked slightly longer until it behaves like cement. The whole thing smells like caramel and panic. Hours pass. The castle grows. Someone knocks over a turret. You do not scream. You do not cry. You rebuild. Consider pouring the rest of the sugar directly into your eyes. You don't, but it's close. Then come the decorations. Flags made of dyed cloth, guards carved from almond paste, a mote of blue jelly, wobbly and judgmental. You add detail until the illusion is complete. It's not just dessert, it's politics. It says our king is wealthy enough to waste sugar. It says, this feast matters more than your rent. It says, look at this castle you can't afford to live in. Now watch us eat it. No one eats the castle. Of course they don't. They admire it. They comment on it. They name the towers after themselves. One man tries to lick a window. He's escorted away. You watch from the wall. Your hands are sticky. Your back aches. Your tunic smells like cooked almonds and the regrets of the ambitious. Later, after the feast, someone will dismantle it. Break it apart. Give the sugar scraps to favored children or servants who pretend not to notice the fingerprints. The jelly moat will melt. The almond guards will crumble. It will all disappear, like every sugar sculpture before it. Like every pastry phoenix, every edible shrine, every pudding shaped like a lute. Expectation, you create something that lasts. Reality, it dissolves overnight, like frost or praise. Still, you build. Because this is your job now. Crafting lies in the language of food. You know it won't last, but you build it anyway. Asterisk, you are holding a jar of saffron. It's barely a jar, really. More like a whisper with a lid. Inside, threads, curled, dry and smug. Each one could pay for a month of firewood. 2, if you know the right merchant, you cradle it like it might explode or evaporate or disappear into thin air. In the royal kitchen, spice is power. It's not flavor, it's status. Cinnamon means connections. Clove means access. Mace means someone in your family made a shady. Trade with a Venetian, and now you have to measure it with the tip of a feather. You were once caught using too much pepper. A pinch, they said. You gave a scoop. The dish was warm, bold, delicious. The steward nearly fainted. Do you think? This is a pirate ship, he asked. You said nothing? He said too much. Now you measure with breath. You weigh with instinct. You touch with prayer. Today's dish calls for nutmeg. You have one nut, just one. It looks like a stone, it smells like the memory of Christmas. It must be grated so gently that it doesn't notice. You scrape it over a stew. 1 stroke. 2. That's enough. Any more and the abbey might send someone to ask questions. Expectation. Flavor that transforms the dish. Reality. Nobles complaining it's not spicy enough while you cry into a pot of barley. The spice room is locked. Only the master cook has the key. You've seen it. A big brass thing worn around his neck like a holy relic. He opens the spice. Chest, like it's a tomb, breathes in the aroma like a poet, and closes it before the smell has a chance to escape. Once, a jar of cardamom broke. The scent filled the hall, while people swooned. Nobles asked if love was in the air. You all pretended It was incense. You're told to prepare a sauce. It needs ginger. You don't have ginger. You have dried horseradish and optimism. You slice it thin, boil it with honey, and add a single clove as a distraction. Someone tastes it and nods. You call it royal bright sauce. No one questions. The name you once tried to save on saffron by using marigold petals. The color matched, the flavor did not. The dish was described as hopeful. You were not punished. But you were watched. This is your world now. The kingdom of spice. A place where taste is a symbol, and too much seasoning is as dangerous as too little. You dream of pepper. Just pepper. Black ground, abundant, enough to coat a loaf, to cover a roast, to make someone sneeze and not care. Instead, you scrape your knuckles against a grater the size of a matchbox and pray that your nutmeg lasts a month. It won't, but that's how it is. You cook with courage, not quantity, and your spices are made of caution. Asterisk, you are copying a recipe, not inventing, not cooking, copying. The royal chef has handed you a parchment that looks older than joy and smells faintly of dried ink, meat drippings, and overconfidence. The recipe is titled, "A subtle broth of fine herbs for the soothing of ill humors and the appeasing of mood and melancholic lords." That's just the title. The actual recipe is 3 lines long. You read it slowly. Take good broth. You pause. Define good. In this kitchen, good broth is broth that doesn't contain an accidental feather or the vague outline of yesterday's spoon. Add leeks, sorrel, and the powdered end of nutmeg. You nod. You have leeks. You have sorrel. Your nutmeg is mostly dust at this point, but that's fine. It's dignified dust. Let it stand until it reflecteth. You frown. Reflect what? The ceiling your sins? Its expectation? Precise instructions? Reality? Vague poetry? Culinary riddles and confident guesswork. You begin anyway. You take the broth from the pot that simmered all morning. It's golden in theory, and has a faint glisten that suggests either fat or a secret. You slice. The leeks. You do it diagonally, because everything tastes fancier when it's diagonal. The sorrel you shred by hand like a peasant with flair. You add the nutmeg dust reverently. You stir. The broth does not reflect. It barely ripples. You wait. Someone tells you to plate it in a silver dish. You don't have a silver dish? You have a pewter bowl with a dent. You shine it with your sleeve and hope no one notices. The finished product is greenish. It smells like the kind of soup that gets described as fortifying by people who've never actually eaten it. You bring it to the hall. A steward takes it without a glance. You don't see the Lord eat it. But later, you hear someone say, "He smiled." Once, briefly, you take that as a win. Back in the kitchen, you're told to prepare another dish. Tart of egrets in the fashion of the Northern Isles, served in puff of air. You blink. You've never seen an egret. You're not entirely sure what a puff of air is. You assume it means very light crust, or perhaps absolutely nothing. You improvise. Make a pastry shell filled with fish and herbs. You fan the top with onion layers to resemble feathers. You serve it with a sprig of something that isn't deadly. You name it accordingly. It's approved. You don't know why. This is the court kitchen. Here names matter more than flavor. Tart of egrets sounds exotic. Fish pie with onions sounds like a Tuesday, so you rename everything. Turnip mash becomes root of the moon. Stale bread fried in goose fat becomes golden crisp of the hunt. Everything gets longer, fancier, less edible. You could boil cabbage and call it Vale of the Eastern Garden. Someone will. Applaud. That's the game. Your food is language now. A vocabulary of illusions. And if you write the menu, just write. No one will ask what's really on the plate. You start before dawn, before the bells, before the frost lifts off the flagstones, before even the mice begin their shift. You light the fire, chop the herbs, skim yesterday's fat from the top of a pot that no longer remembers what it was supposed to be. Today is a banquet. Again, it's always a banquet. Or a pre-banquet. Or a post-banquet reception for guests still chewing the previous banquet. Nobles never seem to eat alone, and they never seem to eat quietly. You have 17 dishes to prepare. Maybe more. You stopped counting around 10. When your hands went numb, and someone handed you a second swan, you begin. Stuffed quail with rose sauce, spiced pigeon on a sugar plate, venison in a crust shaped like a hunting dog, pears boiled in red wine until they resemble bruised jewels.
Ah!
A salad no one will touch, a stew no one will name, expectation, a team of helpful assistants, reality, 3 tired boys and a girl who can't stop sneezing into the flour, the master. Cook barks orders. His voice echoes like thunder in a chamber pot. You nod, you chop, you boil. Someone drops a tray, pretend not to hear it. Someone else forgets the bay leaves, toss in sage instead, and hope the nobility don't know. The difference between herbs or small betrayals. The air thickens with smells. Sweetmeats, clove, burning sugar, your own sweat. The heat is relentless. Your shirt clings, your shoes squelch. You drop a spoon. It vanishes under the rushes. You do not retrieve it. You use your hands. The clock strikes noon, or maybe dusk. You've lost the sense of time. You've gained the sense of urgency. It hangs over you like steam from a boiling pot, constant, prickly, inescapable. The feast begins. Dishes parade out one after another like exhausted dancers in a grim ballet. You stand near the corridor, listening for reactions. Applause, laughter, gagging. Someone laughs. Good. Someone claps. Better. No one throws. But no. One says your name. The master cook receives a nod from the steward. Steward receives a nod from the lord. The lord wipes his mouth with a cloth that costs more than your entire family has seen in a year. You scrape the bones from the plates that return. You notice what's untouched, the molded carrot pudding, the beet paste shaped like a rose. You eat a bite of the untouched pudding. It's not bad. It's sweet. It tastes like trying. You throw the rest away. You wipe the counters. You rewrap the herbs. You cover the pot. The fire dies down. Your feet hum with ache. Your fingers tremble. From fatigue or salt or too much hope, you lie down behind the barrels. Just for a moment, someone calls for breakfast. You rise. You are the court cook. You do not sleep. You do not rest. You do not exist. But your dishes, they're always there. And someone else gets the credit. Asterisk, asterisk, you're roasting a boar today. Not a ham. Not a haunch. An entire boar legs, tusks, and an expression on its snout that suggests it knows this is not the end. It was delivered. It was delivered this morning on a cart that smelled like triumph and wet hay. The hunters were proud. The steward was pleased. You were assigned to cook it. A person whose last masterpiece was a lentil paste molded into the shape of a bishop's hat, are now responsible for the centerpiece of the king's winter feast. Expectation. Glorious, sizzling roast, golden brown, mouth-watering, 30 pounds of angry meat, one undersized fire, and a spit that wobbles when judged. You begin. First, you must clean it. That takes an hour and 2 blunted knives. And one assistant who vomits and is sent outside to reflect on his career choices. Then comes the seasoning. You're given a pouch of spices, rare ones, with names whispered in the market like gossip. Cinnamon, clove, powder deuce, and a lemon that someone swears came from a monk in Sicily. You mix them all with breadcrumbs, vinegar, and stale wine. Smells like ambition soaked in history. You stuff the cavity with apples, onions, herbs, and possibly guilt. Then you sew it shut like a tailor who hates fabric. You mount the boar. On the spit, it groans. The fire sighs. You turn it slowly, carefully, for hours, and the grease drips into the flames, flaring up like insults. Your eyebrows singed. Your sleeves stick to your arms. You rotate. You sweat. You whisper prayers to no saint in particular. By midday, the kitchen smells like glory. Meat spices, sweet fat, and bitter determination. Nobles pass by and glance in, noses raised. One says, "Ah, the roast." At last, as if you hadn't been here since dawn, smelling like ambition and bacon, the boar browns. You glaze it, you baste it. You brush the skin with honey and salt until it shines like a knight's helmet at court, and then you decorate it with herbs. With citrus, With a lemon in its mouth, you reattach the head. You position the tusks. You paint its tongue with berry syrup for that faintly lifelike gleam that says, "I was once wild, but now I serve pudding." It is carried out on a silver tray. 6 men bear it. The king claps. A bishop applauds. Someone faints. It might be the assistant from earlier, still weak from the cleaning. And you? You sit. You eat the discarded trimmings, the burnt skin from the underside, the apple that rolled under the table and was stepped on only once. It's delicious. It tastes like effort, like fire. It's like everything that came before. You know your name won't be mentioned. The roast will be remembered. The cook will be forgotten. But tomorrow, there's another feast, and probably another boar. Asterisk you're making. A pie. Not the cozy, fruit-filled kind you imagine when someone says pie. This is a medieval pie. Which means it's not just food, it's also infrastructure. It's walls, ceilings, trapdoors. It's surprise disguised as starch. Today's request. A pie that sings. You don't flinch anymore. These things are said without irony. "Make the pie sing," the steward says, waving one hand like the logistics are obvious. You nod. You've done worse. You once built a jelly tower that collapsed during a toast and was interpreted as a political statement. First the crust. It must be thick, strong enough to hold mystery. You mix flour with water, lard, and resignation. It forms a dough you can barely dent with your elbow. Perfect. Inside goes the filling. You don't get to choose. Someone else sends down minced pork, eggs, dates, raisins, saffron, and an alarming amount of pepper. You mix it together until it resembles something from a dream you don't want to have again. Then the twist, a hollow chamber, built into the crust beneath the lid. Why? Because they're putting live birds inside. Expectation, charming, whimsical reveal. Reality. Poultry panic baked into a meat volcano. The birds arrive in a small cage. Starlings fluttery and unimpressed. You carefully lower the cage into the false bottom compartment of the pie. You cover it with the pastry lid. You seal the edges like you're packing guilt into a suitcase. You bake the meat portion separately. You leave the bird chamber uncooked. Timing is everything. Too long, and the birds suffocate. Too short, and the pie collapses under its own ambition. When it's ready, you assemble the pieces. Meat pie, hot and golden. Secret chamber, hidden and ominous. A server lifts the finished pie onto a cart and wheels it into the hall. You follow. Just close enough to hear the reaction. At the high table, the lid is lifted. The birds burst out, flapping, screeching, confused by the lighting and the choir. The nobles gasp. They cheer. Someone cries, it sings. You hear laughter. You hear clapping. You hear one bird collide with a chandelier. It's a success. Back. In the kitchen, you clean feathers from your flour jar. One bird didn't make it. Sits quietly under the table, contemplating its life choices. You consider naming it. The rest of the pies are more straightforward. Meat, fish, something called marchpane mystery that you didn't ask questions about. But the singing pie, that's the one they'll remember. Not you, of course. The pie. You'll get assigned to stew tomorrow, or turnip jelly, or that cursed almond milk sauce that clumps like betrayal. But for one moment, your pie made music, sort of. And in this kitchen, that's a win. You're told to make almond milk, for the 3rd time this week. Not because the nobles are dairy-free. No, that would be too modern, too sensible. They simply believe that milk from animals is too humble, too bodily. Almond milk is refined. It is elegant. It is also extremely annoying. Expectation. A soft, creamy liquid made from almonds. Reality, beige water with ambitions of taste, made with blisters and bruised patience. You begin by crushing the almonds with a pestle. By hand. There are no shortcuts. No bags of almond flour. It's just nuts and effort. Your wrists hate you by the 3rd minute. Your elbows file complaints. The almonds don't care. You add hot water, you stir. You wait, you stir again. You strain it through a cloth that was white a decade ago, but now holds the color of surrender. The result is thin, slightly oily, and smells faintly of damp wood and apology. You taste it. It tastes like nothing. Not bad nothing, just beige. A flavor the monks might describe as neutral in spirit and lacking in ambition. Still, it's what the recipe demands. You pour it over boiled chicken, pour it into rice pudding. You pour it into swan stew, yes stew, because someone up there decided that elegance means pouring almond water onto everything that once had feathers. The nobles love it. They describe it as subtle. You nod and say thank you, as if you invented almonds. Sometimes you're told to sweeten it with honey, sometimes with rose water. One time with vinegar. You're still unsure whether that was a mistake or a philosophical challenge. Once, in a moment of rebellion, you salted it instead. No one noticed. The dish was praised for its complexity. You've never stopped thinking about that. You try to save the leftover pulp. The crushed almonds caught in the cloth. It feels wasteful to throw them out. You mix them with bread. Roll them into little balls. Fry them, and call them court snacks. No one eats them. One was used to patch a window. You've started dreaming about almonds? You crack them open in your sleep. You wake up clutching your hand like it holds truth. And the worst part, you still don't really know what it's supposed to taste like. Because no one does. Because the point was never flavor. It was form, fashion. Pretending you're not eating boiled bird and nut water, but partaking in something wholly foreign, vaguely poetic. You spill some. No one sees. You mop it up with your sleeve, and then you make more. Because there's always another almond. Always another cloth to stain. Always another noble who wants subtle in you. You want a glass of real milk, cold thick, from a cow, unapologetic. But here, in King Richard's kitchen, that would be an offense. So instead, you make almond milk again. Asterisk dessert is the grand finale. The crown, the closing act with trumpets, sugar, and bells. If someone has the energy to attach them, and you're the one behind the curtain. Today's finale is towers of sweet paste in the form of castles, served with jelly of quince in the shade of coral, and something optimistically called snow. You begin with the towers. Marchpane, ground almonds, sugar, rose water, pressed into bricks and glued with syrup. You shape turrets, tiny windows, little doors. No one will open. You craft a drawbridge out of stiffened pastry. Pause. You wonder if this counts as architecture. The quince jelly is easier. Boil the fruit, strain, add sugar. Cook until it trembles like a nervous truth. Pour into a mold shaped like a fish. Why a fish? No one explains. You don't ask. Then the snow. Snow. Is whipped cream? Or it would be if you had cream. You don't. You have egg whites and hope. You whip them until your arm burns. Then you whip more. Add sugar. Add rose water. Add disappointment. Expectation. A fluffy, ethereal ending to a royal meal. Reality. A bowl of fragrant foam that collapses under the weight of air. You assemble. The plate. A castle made of nuts and labor. Shimmering jellyfish that jiggles with every footstep. Puddle of snow that already regrets being born. You place mint leaves for garnish. They won't be eaten. They're for decoration. Like you. Server takes the tray. You watch it disappear through the doors. You stand in silence. You once thought dessert meant joy, treat, a celebration. You imagined golden crusts and jam-filled cakes. Instead, you make sugar sculptures no one eats, fruit pastes no one understands, and creamless snow. You sit on a bench. Someone passes you a crust from the feast. It's sweet. It smells like almonds. It's burnt. You chew slowly. Back in the hall, someone applauds. You hear a noblewoman declare the jelly inspired. She means the fish, not the flavor. What? No. A boy returns with the mold. It's sticky. Says nothing. You nod. You rinse it in a basin with cold water and cold fingers. The sun is gone. The oven is quiet. The rushes crunch beneath your feet. You light a candle. You write tomorrow's menu. You will not eat the dessert. You will not taste the jelly. You will not know what it means to be served. But you will make it again, because dessert is for them. You are just the hands that build it. Asterisk. It starts with a boot. A left one. Cracked at the sole and stiff with time. Found beneath the floorboards of a crumbling manor, unearthed by someone looking for coins or ghosts. You are not the one who finds it, but you're the one who ends up holding it, because everyone else decided the smell was historically overwhelming. Inside the boot is parchment, folded, pressed flat against the worn leather like it was hiding or listening. When you unroll it, something flakes off. Not dust, seasoning, possibly time, possibly age. The writing is faint, ink faded, script crooked and cramped, as if it was written in a hurry or while avoiding suspicion. Across the top, in a hand too shaky for flourishes, recipes for common and curious suppers, expectation, secrets of the royal kitchen, reality, personal notes in ink that once ran, next to a grease stain shaped like guilt. You read aloud, stew of grain and nettles, served cold, good for melancholy and swelling of the throat. You blink, you read it again, doesn't help. There are other entries. To prepare the rat, WTH cider and mustard. Why the egg must not be eyed too long. No explanation follows. Bread, soaked in ale, then dried at moonrise. Can't tell if it's a cookbook or a slow unraveling of someone's final thoughts. Still, you try one. You make the nettle stew. You collect the leaves wearing gloves, because the last time you touched nettles barehanded, your fingers buzzed for 3 days. The grain is barley. You boil it down, mix it with a pinch of mustard seed, a splash of cider, and a whisper of hope. It smells. Okay, it looks like swamp ambition. You taste it. It's not terrible. It's not good. It's food. Someone else tries it. They say it tastes like green decisions. You nod like that makes sense. You move on. You soak the bread in ale. You dry it on a stone near the hearth. It hardens into a texture that feels vaguely architectural. You bite. It shatters. You chew. You regret. You test the rat recipe. Not with a rat, you haven't fallen that far. But you apply the cider mustard logic to salted fish. It works better than expected. The flavor is bold, confusing, distracting, like conversation with an ant who owns too many knives. The recipes. Go on. Some useful, some poetic. One just says, boil the moon. Strain through cloth. Do not name it. You wonder about the person who wrote this. Someone with access to ingredients. Someone with a sense of humor. Or madness. Or both. You keep the parchment. You try a new recipe each week. You alter nothing. You trust the boot. Because this is how food works sometimes. It hides. Waits. It reappears under a floorboard, wrapped in leather and mystery, and suddenly you're making stew because someone in the past had a strange night in a leaky boot. You flip to the next entry in the parchment. Pudding for the Teethless. That's the entire title. No subtitle, no explanation. Just a grim promise. You stare at the words. You hope it's soft. You hope it's sweet. You hope it doesn't involve boiling bones. You've been wrong before. You gather what's listed. Milk. Or something approximating milk. Breadcrumbs, marrow fat, dried cherries, or any fruit not currently covered in dust. And a sprig of summer if to hand. You have no summer. November, you mash the breadcrumbs until they're fine. Melt the marrow until it resembles something scraped from a candle. The cherries are less dried and more resigned. You mix everything in a pot that looks like it holds secrets and smells faintly of last week's onion. It simmers. Slowly you stir. It thickens. Sort of. Tries you serve it warm in a wooden bowl because everything tastes slightly more bearable. When it's warm and wood-toned, you take a bite. It's soft. Oppressively so. It dissolves in your mouth with the urgency of a lie. The flavor is hard to place. Part fatty, part sweet, part memory of something better. Expectation, comforting, gentle pudding, reality. A meal that feels like being slowly hugged by a waxy ghost. You bring it to your neighbor. An old man with no teeth and very few opinions. He tries a spoonful. He nods slowly, as if recognizing something from long ago. He says nothing. He eats the rest. You leave the bowl. You return to the parchment. The next recipe is just a list. Whey, bean meal, and burnt crust. No instructions. No amounts. It ends with serve humbly. You try it anyway. You mix the whey and bean meal. Smells like farm mistakes. You add a burnt crust from the bottom of yesterday's bread. It floats like a question. You simmer it. You taste it. It's bad. You eat it anyway. Because it's warm. Because it's not poison. Because dinner has never been about joy. You try. One more? It's titled A Cake of Patience. It contains flour, vinegar, rose petals, and a whole egg boiled in shell and all. You stare at the egg. You drop it in. The cake bakes unevenly. The corners are too hard. Center is too soft. The shell cracks but stays inside. You bite down and nearly chip a tooth. You spit out a fragment. You chew again. It tastes like ambition, calcium. You decide not to serve it. You store the page under your blanket where it curls like an old friend. We'll try again tomorrow, because this isn't about taste. It's about trying. About following instructions from a stranger who once cooked in the dark with ingredients that could barely be called edible. And still, they wrote it down. They saved it in a shoe. They thought someone, someday, might be hungry enough to. Try it, and here you are. Asterisk. You read the next entry. Pie of the air and crumb, for days when meat hath fled. You appreciate the honesty. The ingredients are sparse. Coarse flour. Water, fat, if God hath granted it, a crust of bread, and thy best manner of pretending. You already know this pie. You've made it before, under different names, on different days. It's not a recipe, it's a confession. You begin with the flour. It's coarse, not country, rustic coarse. More like gravel with ambition. You sift it as best you can, though the sieve broke last week, and now you just shake it through your fingers like your blessing, something you secretly pity. Water is easy, fat is not. You scrape the bottom of the jar, smear of lard remains. You use it like it's sacred. The dough is stiff. It cracks when rolled. You patch it with water, then more dough, then denial. You press it into a dish, not to shape it, but to hold it in place so it doesn't escape. Expectation, a light flaky crust. Reality, a defensive wall you must now fill with sadness. You tear the bread crust into crumbs. You soak them in broth, or what's left of yesterday's broth, now more wish than liquid. The result is a sort of mush, not unpleasant, not pleasant, just functional. You add herbs, you think it needs herbs, or everything needs herbs. You use parsley, it wilts. In contact, you nod solemnly. You pour the mixture into the crust. It doesn't pour, it glops. You smooth the top with the back of a spoon and add a few curls of onion skin. For color, for texture, for comedy, you bake it, it bakes unevenly. The top browns. Too fast, the sides stay pale. You rotate it. You curse. You pray. The fire does what it wants. Eventually it's done. Or tired, you remove it. It smells like crust, like effort, like a meal from the part of the month when coins have vanished and promises are due. You slice it. The filling holds, barely. The crust resists your knife, but surrenders to persistence. You take a bite, it's warm. It's the best part. The crumbs have taken on a texture like wet stuffing left too close to a candle. The herbs are detectable, like background music you didn't ask for. The crust tastes like all the walls you've built around your hunger. Someone else tries it. They say it's not bad. You smile. You don't believe them. Later, you wrap the leftovers in cloth and place them near the hearth. They'll keep. The crust is more preservative than food. You return to the parchment. Underneath the recipe, in a fainter hand, serve WTH thanks. For thou still hast crust, and not all are so blessed. You read it twice. You breathe, and you eat another slice. Because sometimes, making a pie from nothing is still something, even if it tastes like almost asterisk. The next page begins with a command. Steal an egg. Not gather, not fetch, not procure with. Goodwill. No steal, you blink. The rest of the recipe follows like a ransom note from a tired chef. Steal an egg. Beat it soundly. Add 2 warm beer. Stir Wittershins. Salt. If mercy finds you, serve it once to the ungrateful. You've never felt so personally attacked by a paragraph. Still, you follow it, Because of course you do. You don't steal an egg. Oh. You borrow one. From a neighbor who isn't home. You'll replace it. Probably eventually. Maybe you hold the egg like it might scream. You whisper an apology. You crack it into a bowl. You beat it. Soundly. It foams like it's protesting. You warm the beer. You do not boil it. The last time you boiled beer, it tried to leave the pot and never looked back. Warmed gently, it smells like bread on the edge of burning and feet at the end of a fair day. You pour the egg in, slowly. It curdles immediately. Expectation. Smooth, nourishing tonic. Reality. Hot beer porridge with identity issues. You stir counterclockwise widdershins because you've committed now. And this might be witchcraft, and you don't want to offend whatever invisible force is watching you. Salt it. The recipe said if mercy finds you, mercy did not. The salt is clumped. You break it up with a spoon and lie to yourself. You pour it into a cup. It steams. It smells like ale and breakfast gone too far. You sip. It's not awful. It's strange, warm, yeasty, slightly sharp. Like someone tried to make soup using only vague advice and anger. You serve it to your cousin. They make a face. They drink the rest. They ask for another. You glance at the neighbor's henhouse. You shake your head. Later, you read the bottom of the parchment. A note, faint, added in smaller handwriting. Good for colds. Better for those who complain often, may cause dreams. Yes. Do not stir twice. You wonder about the person who wrote this. Did they stir twice? Did they forget the salt? Did they have someone ungrateful to serve? Think about adding cinnamon next time? You didn't. You clean the cup. You wipe the spoon. You mark the recipe with a charcoal star. Not because it's good, but because it made you feel something. Because sometimes food is not about flavor. Sometimes it's about mischief. Sometimes it's about trying. Sometimes it's about stealing an egg just to see if you still can. You fold the parchment. You tuck it back into the shoe like you're returning it to its home. And you go to bed wondering what may cause dreams actually means. This page is smudged. The inks run like it was caught in the rain. Or tears, or both. The title is mostly gone. Only 3 legible words remain. Toad, not alive. You sit with that for a moment. You scan the list. There's no toad. Everything. There's vinegar, mint, onion peel, boiled barley, and ash of bread. You're not sure if it's a meal or a curse. You make it anyway. The ash is the easiest part. The bottom of yesterday's bread is already halfway there. You scrape it carefully, like it contains truth. The barley's been soaking overnight. You forgot about it. Forgives you. You boil everything in a pot you no longer trust. It smells like a funeral for seasoning. You stir slowly, and the color turns gray. Just gray. You add mint. It doesn't help. The mint looks around and quietly gives up. You taste it. It's sour. It's hot. It's confusing. Expectation. A joke. Reality. Dinner. There's a note at the bottom of the recipe. Serve on black cloth with silence. Good for guests who linger. You make a mental list of people you'd serve this to. The next entry is equally unclear. Beans of reluctance. Dice. Already know the tone. It's the kind of recipe you make when hope has left but hunger stayed behind out of habit. It includes dried beans, of course. Vinegar again. A rind of cheese you wouldn't eat on purpose. And something called onion. Despair, which you assume means the soft, translucent end of an onion that's been aging like a monk. You cook it all. The beans stay hard, as beans do when they know they're unwanted. You chew one. It cracks like a secret. You keep chewing. You feel humble, tired, alive. You find another recipe labeled rain mush. Instructions are a single line. Take. What is left? Heat with water, add thought. You stare at the pot in front of you. A mess of grayish barley, bean fragments, wilted mint, vinegar steam. You follow the final step. Add. Thought you do. You think about the cook who wrote this. Alone. Underpaid. Hungry. Watching guests leave with crumbs in their beards and praise on their lips, but never names, never thanks, never an invitation. To sit and eat what they had made. You think about all the meals that started with jokes. With nothing, the lie told to an empty pantry and answered by boiling water, you stir. You taste, it's awful. And it's yours. You call it something. You don't know what. Maybe stew of persistence. Maybe dish of we'll see. You serve it to no one. You eat it slowly, quietly in the corner, because you know what this food is. It's not celebration. It's not nourishment. It's a reminder that you cooked, that you tried, that someone once folded these words into a boot and believed. Somehow that you'd find them. Asterisk, the castle is loud tonight. Voices echo in the hall like laughter trapped in a wine barrel. There's music somewhere, reedy, repetitive, performed by a boy who's never been warm. The tables groan under silver and linen, laden with dishes so elaborate they seem to apologize for being edible. And you are. Behind the curtain, again. Forever. You thought once that a banquet meant celebration, food would be shared, that the kitchen would be a warm place, full of laughter, grease, and pride. It's not, it's quiet urgency. It's firewood that burns too fast. It's trays that wobble when you breathe on them. You prepare the 15th dish of the evening. Duck in saffron sauce, topped with gilded almond slivers and something called culinary snow. You don't ask. You just crush the sugar like it insulted you. Sprinkle it on top. Hope no one checks the bottom for burn. Expectation. You will eat once everyone else has. Reality. You lick a spoon and call it indulgence. The roast is carried out. It's applauded. The duck, not you. You wipe your hands. You stir a pot. You replate the marzipan hedgehogs, because one has collapsed into sadness. You give it a new nose. A noble enters the kitchen, just to check, not to help. He lifts a lid, sniffs, says too much clove. You stare at him with the polite deadness of someone who's survived worse. He nods, leaves, and takes a fig tart with him. You won't see that tart again. Someone tells you the queen smiled at the eel tower. You didn't know it was a tower? You thought it was a mistake? You nod as if you planned it. The hall claps again. The dancers swirl. The dishes vanish one by one. You eat the crust from the edge of a serving tray. Tastes like duck in distance. Someone calls for another course. You fetch the molded jelly, green, wobbly, and shaped like a cathedral. Carry it like you're holding someone's dreams. You do not drop it. Not this time. You step back into the shadows. You listen. You do not eat. You do not sit. You do not speak. You are the hands behind the feast. The mouth that never opens. The stomach that tightens, not from food, but from watching it pass by. And still, you will prepare the next dish. Because someone must, because the hall demands. Because the jelly must wobble again. Asterisk, you are decorating. A roast, not garnishing, not seasoning, decorating. Because in the castle banquet hall, food isn't just food, it's a guest, performer, sometimes a threat. Tonight's centerpiece is a boar's head. It's just the head, cleaned, cooked, polished, with a glazed apple in its mouth and eyes made from. You don't ask, they stare. You place it on the silver tray. You tuck parsley around the neck. You light the small candles behind the eyes. Yes, there are candles. Yes, they flicker. Yes, the effect is uncanny. Dinner guest who knows your secrets. Expectation. Dramatic presentation. Reality. Mild haunting by a pig. The nobility adore it. They applaud. Someone gives it a name. Back in the kitchen, you prepare the next item. A fish pie that is also technically 5 fish pies layered together. Shaped into a leaping trout and painted with saffron glaze, so it shimmers like something. From a dream you weren't ready for, you insert cloves for eyes. It stares too. You wonder when food became performance. Maybe it always was. Peasants eat to live, and nobles eat to be seen eating. You carry out the trout. You set it down beside the boar's head. Now they're both watching. The trout glistens. The boar glows. You back away slowly, the guests are delighted. They poke, they laugh. One man speaks to the boar, and the boar, to its credit, remains diplomatic. You return for the dancing custards. Wobbling mounds of cream and egg, molded into the shape of jesters. Their hats are red. Currants, their smiles are etched in burnt sugar. You hate them. One collapses on the tray. You smear its smile back into place. You don't serve them on plates. You place them gently onto wooden platters carved like stages. One of them jiggles dramatically when carried. Noblewoman claps and declares it alive. That was the goal. You serve the custards beside the trout and the boar. Now the table looks like a council of edible creatures deciding the fate of desert. You leave before they make eye contact. Later, you scrape the leftovers into a bin. You can't tell what's food and what's still pretending. You find a spoon lodged inside one of the custards. You leave it there. You sit on a stool. You breathe. Eat a crust of bread with your back to the jellyfish, the sugar jesters. The candlelit pig, because food is not supposed to look back. It's supposed to nourish, to fill, to remind you that you're still here. But here in the castle hall, food has a face, a name, a stage, and you. You are just the one who paints the eyes. Asterisk, there is a swan in front of you, not alive, not quite dead, somewhere in between. Roasted, yes, but then redressed in its own feathers, head reattached with wire and hope, wings fanned wide like it's about to take flight directly into the middle of someone's supper. You didn't ask for this, you were told. Make the swan look majestic. You wanted to ask what that meant. You didn't, you just nodded. And now, here you are, constructing a bird like a taxidermist with culinary ambitions and only mild remorse. You use honey to make the feathers stick. They don't want to. Dab and press and pray. They slide, slump, then finally cling, as if embarrassed. The neck won't stand upright. You brace it with cinnamon sticks. You hope no one bites that part. The beak is painted gold. Gold paint. Gold. You grind a coin, mix it with egg white, and dab it gently onto the tip. Like this somehow improves the flavor of a roasted waterfowl that has been both cooked and reassembled like a polite monster. Expectation. Nobility will gasp. Reality. Nobility will blink, sip wine, and ask if it's the same swan as last week. You arrange it on a platter. You surround it with oranges. Oranges are rare, exotic. They say, this meal is better than you. You polish them until they shine like small citrus threats. You carry the platter to the hall. Slowly. It's heavy, not just from the swan, but from meaning. This is not just dinner. It's a statement, a sculpture, spectacle. You set it down. There is a murmur. Ah! Guest applauds. Another says, I had one of those at my cousin's wedding. Pretend not to hear. Someone asks, is it real? You nod. You do not explain which part. Back in the kitchen, you collapse into a stool. Your fingers are sticky. Your apron is covered in feathers and regret. A kitchen boy tries to eat a spare orange. You glare. He puts it back. Later, a servant returns with the platter. The swan is untouched. The oranges are gone. You stare at the bird. You sigh. You pick it up and peel off a wing. The skin is crisp. The meat is dry. Tastes like effort. You whisper majestic and eat another bite. The recipe called for. Cloves in the eyes. You didn't add them. You thought it was too much. Now you wonder if that was the mistake, not going far enough. Because in this hall, food isn't supposed to make sense. It's supposed to perform, to confuse, to shimmer. You build a swan. You carry a swan, you explain a swan, and no one eats it. Tonight's banquet has reached the jelly portion. You don't know when it became a tradition to end feasts with edible architecture. But here you are, guarding towers of wobble with the nervous focus of a sleepless engineer. These are not simple jellies. These are multi-tiered, saffron-tinted, rosewater-scented monuments to anxiety. You didn't ask for this, but someone handed you a copper mold the size of a helmet and said, the Duke likes height, and now you're here, holding your breath as you unmold the third jelly tower. Expectation, a delicate, translucent dessert. Reality, a dessert that trembles like it knows something you don't. You prepared the mixture early. Boiled calves' feet, skimmed the fat, clarified it with egg white, strained it through cloth, added sugar, lemon, and a whisper of panic. Then, you poured it into greased molds and left them near the window where the air is cold and judgmental. Hours passed. The jelly set, or didn't. You can't always tell. Some look firm but collapse with the enthusiasm of a nobleman's promise. You tilt the mold. You pray. You lift it holds. You nearly weep. You decorate it with candied violets and pomegranate. Seeds. The violets melt slightly. The pomegranate rolls off. You replace it, you press it in. It leaks faintly. You call it intentional. Another jelly refuses to emerge from its mold. You tap. You shake. You whisper threats. Finally, it slurps out sideways like a startled slug. You prop it up with fruit. It leans. You turn that side to the wall. The final tower is molded to resemble a church. You think that's too far? But someone else disagreed loudly and carried. A sketch. You fill the mold, knowing you will never get that jelly to hold a steeple. You don't even try. You serve it with a missing roof. You say it was bombarded in spirit. The trays are lifted. Carried out, the guests applaud. One claps at a jelly for standing upright. Another asks if it's made of crystal. A third pokes it with a knife, and it wobbles in reply. Everyone cheers. You in the kitchen collapse onto a bench. Your arms smell like syrup. Your fingers are sticky. Your hair is full of petals you didn't remember using. Someone brings back a tray. Empty. All eaten. You don't know how to feel. The jellies are gone. You made them. You don't know if anyone knew that. You nibble a leftover violet. It tastes like nothing in perfume. You nod. Because in this hall, the jelly must not collapse. Not in the kitchen. Not on the tray. Not in public. And not in you. Asterisk, the hall has quieted. The music has slowed, then stopped. The laughter echoes once, then doesn't return. The nobles stagger from the room like overfed ghosts, full of opinions and syrup and several dozen items they can no longer name. You stand in the corner, watching a servant try to remove a custard. From a tapestry, it doesn't work. The long tables are littered. Bones, wilted herbs, empty goblets. A quail skeleton arranged into what might be a dancing pose. You didn't do that. Probably the air smells of cinnamon, wax, and fatigue. Expectation. Someone thanks the kitchen. Reality. Someone forgets the kitchen exists. You step forward, you begin the clearing. Slowly, carefully. You remove the swan carcass. You lift it by the cinnamon-braced neck. It bends slightly. You nod. It's earned the rest. You scrape scraps into a pail. You pause when you find a piece of boar untouched, still garnished with rosemary and a little curl of lemon. You eat it with your fingers. It's cold. It tastes like applause that never reached the back row. A custard has slid off its tray and taken a silver spoon with it. You leave both where they fell. The jelly remnants are everywhere. In cups, on cloth, in places no jelly should ever have been. Wipe them gently. They smear into abstract art. You stop wiping. The marzipan hedgehogs are all headless. Someone bit the wrong end. You line them up, facing the same direction. You don't know why? You find a single candied violet left on a plate, untouched. You carry it back to the kitchen like it's a rare coin. You eat it. It tastes like perfume and persistence. A servant enters. She says the queen is pleased. You nod. She adds that his lordship has requested fewer feathers next time. You nod again. No, you do not ask which dish. It doesn't matter to you. Light one last candle to see beneath the table. You find a roll, a grape, a small knife, a very full silence. You blow out the candle. You sit. You breathe. Tomorrow, there will be another banquet. Another performance. Another jelly in a mold shaped like a cathedral. Another boar posed as if considering politics. But tonight it is over. The food was grand, the plates were cleared. The applause was loud, and no one asked who cooked it. Asterisk so. Now, the fire has gone quiet. And the swan's feathers have been swept into the ash pile with the dreams of jelly towers and almond snow. The kitchen rests, just for a moment, and your feet, sticky and sore, have finally stopped moving. No one remembers the hands that shaped the feast, but you do. You always do. Thank you for staying all the way to the end of this strange, sweet banquet. If you're still awake, maybe the next video will offer a bit more rest, maybe a now. As you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you.